Welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navic's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navic.co. This episode is brought to you by Overwolf. With over 1,500 games supported, 165,000 creators, and 38 million monthly active users, Overwolf is the guild for in-game creators. Whether you're a gamer, creator, or game studio, Overwolf is the ultimate destination for integrating UGC in games. For game studios, Overwolf offers CurseForge for studios, a white label solution that lets game makers and publishers easily integrate mods safely and seamlessly into their games, both existing and new, at zero cost. It's battle-tested by AAA studios and games, including Maxis with The Sims 4, Studio Wildcard with Ark, Take-Two Interactive, and others. For creators, Overwolf is the all-in-one platform that enables creators to build, distribute, and monetize in-game apps, mods, and game servers. In 2022, Overwolf paid over $160 million to in-game creators, proving that they truly value the talents and contributions of the gaming community. You can check out everything Overwolf has to offer at overwolf.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Aaron Bush, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Josh Ye. Josh is on the cusp of a career change, but is a longtime reporter, having worked at organizations like the South China Morning Post and Reuters most recently. But I wanted him to hop on the podcast today because for years, Josh's work has been one of my go-to resources for staying on top of what's happening in China's gaming market, as well as tech more broadly. He's expertly covered all of the big Chinese companies in our space, all the regulatory news, what's going on with AI right now, and more. So today we're going to discuss the state of the Chinese gaming industry, what the big players are up to, and what we can learn from what's different over there. So with all of that said, Josh, welcome to the Navic Gaming Podcast.
Thank you, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So before diving into all the details, Josh, could you just quickly tell us the story of your career? How did you get into reporting and what all did you cover?
Yeah, so I restarted my journalism career when I was still in university. I was writing for a school's newspaper. And actually, I started as a philosophy major, but then I realized that the world is really not about cold hard logic. It's more about people's feelings and people's emotions and all that. So I became a school newspaper reporter. So that's like 10 years ago. So I've been writing for like 10 years. So at the time, I reported a lot on Chinese immigrants, ethnic minorities, issues on campus and around the University of Pittsburgh. I went to University of Pittsburgh. And after that, we went back to Hong Kong and started my career at the South China Morning Post as a business reporter. Later, specialized and focused on tech and with gaming and entertainment and social media as my bread and butter. And a couple of years ago, I moved to Reuters, another terrific organization. And with that, it's also like my focus has been on software, online entertainment, online services, and just I was the main software industry reporter. So that's how it all started. But then I feel like gaming really became a focus for me, a highlight for me, because I grew up when I was still at university. I grew up with a bunch of Asian kids. They really bonded through playing League of Legends together. That was the time when League of Legends really took off, right? And I was like, wow, the power of competitive gaming, esports is really kind of a new experience that unlike anything we have seen before. So that kind of sown the seed in me. And then when I went to Hong Kong, I did business reporting. What came to my mind again is that, few people knew that, Riot was owned by Tencent. It's such an undertold story at the time. Tencent was, unleashing a bunch of, new, interesting games, not just Tencent, right? NetEase, a bunch of, a new crop of Chinese gaming companies. For me, that was just, the most fascinating story. I dreamt of, writing a book and writing long form stories about it. and then just kind of put myself, on the forefront of this newsfeed, and then been able to break a lot of very interesting stories and then tell it to the rest of the world.
That's awesome. And so if you look back at the past several years of you doing reporting as your career, especially in gaming, I'm just curious, are there any stories that you like firmly remember that stood out to you at the time or were just really interesting to go through as those events were unfolding?
I think a few stories come to mind, right? Like I just said, at the time, League of Legends took off. So the rise of Chinese esports, right? At the time, it was just kind of a bunch of geeks, like I said, playing, and then all of a sudden, you got big major leagues, coming through, and then the formation of the Chinese League of Legends leagues, like LPL, that was crazy. And then when Chinese teams won the Worlds, a couple of years ago, we're talking about 100 million users tuning in to watch the game, and that's like a crazy amount. Like even Super Bowl, it doesn't reach that level. And now it's a bit of a very interesting transition period. People are kind of making different moves about how they kind of position esports and all that. So it's still an ongoing story. So that's one story that really comes to mind. I guess it's more gradual collection of stories than one specific story. And I think also on the just gaming product side of things, what was very fascinating at the time was I don't know if you remember the explosion of the battle royale genre, right?
Yeah,
that was the first time. Yeah, like that was the first time I felt like mobile gaming really kind of solidified its place in the gaming ecosystem. Because, before that, we got like Honor Kings, a bunch of mobile MOBA, but there still wasn't a consensus whether, a hardcore gaming experience can be replicated onto like a smartphone, right? But then with PUBG Mobile and then, Knives Out and all these are full-fledged, open, like big battle, was a third-person shooter, just got crammed into a little device that you could play, and it was crazy. So, and then all these kind of Chinese companies just raced the clock to produce these kind of products. And to me, that was like, okay, maybe this is serious. Like, no, this is not just Candy Crush anymore, right? We're at a whole different level, and a lot of companies are capable of doing that. So I feel like that was also another interesting story.
No, those are great. Those are all huge pivotal moments for our industry in which China, companies in China, were at the tip of the spear and bringing those movements to life. So that's fascinating. And I teased it in the intro that you're on the cusp of a career change, but maybe you can quickly fill the audience in on what you're up to next, and then we can dive into the meat of the discussion.
Sure. Yeah. So, I spent the past couple of years at Reuters recovering the forefront of the gaming industry. And now I'm in the process of joining VSPL, which is Asia's biggest esports company, as their head of international comms, right? This opportunity came about because I knew Dino, who's the founder of the company, and then he's, lobbying me a couple of times, like, Josh, come on board. This is a big opportunity. And then, like I said, esports is such a big phenomenon in China right now. People are talking about the industry is kind of facing a bit of adjustment. So I feel like the story is kind of fell out of focus a bit. But I think it's because of that. In me, there's a fire that I felt like this is actually still a long-term story. Maybe people's attention span is a bit short, and then they just face some obstacles, and then they kind of forgot about it. But I think the fundamentals are there. So like, they say that, you go in when people are not looking, right? So I feel like this is a bit of a time that, people underestimate the industry. And then, Dino really wants my help because, if you're actually paying attention right now, we have a lot of big moments, facing esports. Esports are trying to get itself into, maybe the Olympic conversation. Esports World Cup is happening. So these are all next level stuff because, in China, last year, esports already became a medal sport in Asian game, right? So it's very interesting. I started covering esports when it first as a SEA game, so Southeast Asia game as a medal sport, and then it got to Asian games, and then now we're talking about maybe a next level. So Dino has this idea, and then he lobbied me very hard. He wants people to really be able to help ESPO get out there, because previously ESPO is just more of a 2B company, not comfortable, but more focused on building out its Chinese business. But you probably are aware that Savvy invested a bunch in VSPO, and then that dovetails with Dino's vision to really push the company outside of the Chinese border. So right now it's a very interesting time. So for me, it's a great challenge, and being at this company, actually I get to touch so many different products, right? Like it's not just one particular product. I don't get stuck in one particular product. So for me, that's what I'm up to right now.
That's exciting, and I'm excited to see where the business goes from here, especially if they're really pushing on expansion. I was going to ask this question later in the conversation, but since we're talking about esports now, I'll pull it up. As you alluded to, there's been quite a lot of change in the esports landscape. Like in the West, several businesses have had massive cuts. Companies that have gone public have basically been forced to go private again. There's been bankruptcies, major turnover in the big leagues, and even some leagues have had to shut down or restructure themselves. How does that compare to what's going on in the China esports landscape? Is there a similar business model shift going on? Has it been healthier over there over the past couple of years? How does it contrast to what we see in the West?
I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it, right? Because the industry itself is facing an adjustment due to a couple of things. Gaming product cycles, as well as sort of post-COVID. People are trying to really figure out a sustainable business model, and those are sort of the long-term factors that we live with. And in China, the industry is facing some transition, but I would say that actually VSPO's position and then financial health is still very healthy. That's why I feel like this is the right time to go in, because what I see is the opportunity, right? Like sponsorship money right now is still nowhere compared to sports sponsorship money. But we are still, but at least in VSPO's case, we've been able to stabilize it, and then actually is steady growth. So we don't see a declining interest in brands and companies trying to commercialize and advertise through esports. So for me, that's when I asked about all the questions you just asked, and then he told me that he was like, yeah. So we're not kind of cratering in any sort of sense. Actually, we're seeing a slight uptick. Sure, we would love the growth to be stronger. We are on a very kind of solid foundation. But if you just look at the upside, it's crazy, right? This is the goal that we're trying to reach. I feel like another story of that is that you have to look at how it was back then. In the beginning when ESPO started the company, like Dino telling me that they're knocking on people's door, knocking on brands' door to ask them to collaborate, to maybe figure out some ways to kind of work together. But now it's actually a little different, right? Because the Honor of Kings League, people were actually knocking on our door trying to sponsor these competitions. So it's very different, and because the sort of broadcasting table, the product placement can only fit in so many products. So it's amazing. Like this is again another undertold story that really kind of got my interest. So you talk about esports right now in China. We're talking about kind of being able to really connect the China ecosystem with the rest of the world. So that's why Dino's very hard on the point of integrating with the esports World Cup, as well as potentially Olympics, and doing all that.
Cool. Well, appreciate you breaking that down. But let's go ahead and zoom back out. Obviously, China's gaming market is now the second largest gaming market in the world, but is very close to being on par with the size of the US gaming market. I think just off by like a couple billion in annual revenue. And obviously its trajectory over the past couple decades has been pretty monumental. And there are a lot of, elements of the rise that I think many of us are aware of. The rise of like piggybacking off of big platforms, really leveraging mobile etc. But as you kind of look back at the rise of China's gaming market, are there any elements to that rise that you think might surprise people who haven't been paying super close attention or have just been far away from that landscape?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about 10 to 20 years ago, 20 years ago, that is like when World of Warcraft, first came about, right? I feel like that was a big moment for China. Actually, I think that's sown the seed for, now we're talking about China, live service, free to play, and all these kind of paradigms that's associated with China's gaming industry, right? So World of Warcraft, came out. That was the first time China really kind of embraced a big foreign game in such a massive way that we're talking about tens of millions of people playing it together. that show the power of what an online piece of entertainment can really kind of get to the enormous potential of such a big online game, right? It's like you're playing in one province and then you're matching up with another guy in other province. You guys are next door neighbors. That was unlike anything we've seen before. And what I said that sowing the seed for future developments, because that's when a period of time that all my friends, any cool friends, they went to internet cafe and just spent time doing playing World of Warcraft. And unlike in the West where you guys grew up with console games, you guys buy games and own games, that kind of solidified the consumer behavior where you own games, right? But with World of Warcraft, because it's so massively popular, people are so used to just going, logging in and playing games and that not owning them, right? And that in some cases, they're free to play, but World of Warcraft, a lot of times you have to buy credits to play for a certain duration. But still, that kind of consumer behavior cemented during that period of time. So now a lot of people talk about, I don't understand why it wasn't, the Asian market is such a way. It really started that, the MMO period, the MMO era, kind of is where, consumer behavior formed. And so, I wouldn't call this a surprise, but, I feel like this is an undertold story that comes up a lot, that I have to explain to a lot of the Western audience that why live service are have been developed, in such a sophisticated way in China, because, everybody trying to model their business model with World of Warcraft at the time. Yeah. And then that translated into later on the big PC MMOs, and then later on the mobile gaming era. And when online mobile payment really became a reality, this thing just got supercharged. And then now this is sort of the most profitable and most mature way to run a game.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that World of Warcraft sort of set a benchmark that inspired kind of set a baseline for many other games to build on top of. I guess a similar question in terms of what we see today. Obviously, there are differences in the composition of China's gaming market to other parts of the world. It's very mobile centric, very free to play centric. But are there other elements to China's gaming market today in terms of how it differs from other parts of the world that similarly might surprise people who aren't paying close attention?
Yeah, I think it's the story is actually interesting because it's a bit of a course correction story. Like I just told you, now people associate Chinese gaming with just live service and free to play games. Actually, things are coming full circle, right? Chinese gamers' taste matured. Like I said, before they couldn't afford a game, and now their spending power has increased, and then their taste has matured. So now we're talking about a lot of Chinese companies trying to make AAA games, right? Because that's what the players want. They're like, okay, we're satisfied with the big, maybe the big MMOs, maybe with lesser graphics, but now we want the top, right? That's why we're talking about Black Myth Wukong, and a lot of hype is sort of rallying around these titles is because they represent whether China's able to make these kind of top of the line AAA games, right? So it's kind of national pride on the line, or Chinese industries pride on the line, because we're so good at was it running a game, but then now can be produced like artistically the highest level.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot. So you see a lot of the companies are trying to push these kind of AAA games. Sony, they started kind of have an accelerator trying to help a lot of the console game developments in China. They a couple years ago, and then if you look at Last Sentinel by was it Tencent, that got teased at the Games Award. That's
Right.
also a very interesting endeavor. All of that point to the direction that Chinese gaming fans they want to see a China made in China AAA quality game.
Really interesting. And we'll get back to some nuance of that a bit later, especially in terms of like how this can be a tactic for Chinese companies to also expand internationally when they're under pressure at home in some ways. Which leads me to just a big topic that's super relevant to what's going on, which is regulation. Regulation on miners, on business models, on game approvals, on all sorts of elements of what runs China's gaming market. And we don't need to rehash what all of the regulations are. I feel like our audience is aware of the highlights, but can you maybe dig one layer deeper and speak to like what the actual impact of these regulations have been on the gaming ecosystem? Like how has the company landscape or just the ecosystem landscape changed because of the just as a result of like new rules that have been set forth, or how priorities have shifted at all? However you want to take that. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
2017, we have about 10,000 game approvals. So to formally release a game in China, you need approval from the government. We have about 10,000 approvals granted that year. And the past couple of years, we're talking about fewer than 1,000. And this year actually is bouncing back quite in a strong way. We're looking at maybe 1,500. Yeah, fact check that. But during the first half of this year, we're already getting a lot of approvals because it's a bit of a ongoing kind of dynamic with the industry and the government. Unlike in the U.S. or in the West, where the industry self-regulate, here the game industry does have to engage government for quite a bit because the government is a regulator. Long story short, you see the trajectory of game approval become a lot tighter. That's for sure. And so, with that being said, regulations are part of the gaming landscape. The feature of it, right? You have to kind of live and breathe and be comfortable with it. If you listen to all the earnings call by big companies, they're saying that this is the new normal. So, if somehow you have somehow you feel like it's going to go away, it's not going to go away. But with that being said, how that changed the Chinese gaming landscape, that because you have to get approvals, that's why actually you have to partner with like big companies, right? You have to partner with companies that really know what the government wants, and then can be able to comply with a lot of different rules. So yeah, I'll always say that we're seeing a bit of a consolidation, because of the regulation here. Another thing that you have to understand, the regulation side with China is that is actually the industry is in constant conversation with the regulators. So that's why this year we see an increased number of game approvals. That's a sign that's indicative of the government's willingness to see more products on the market. And so yeah, I guess roughly that's sort of the lay of the land right now.
Yeah, I guess to just double click into your consolidation point, it makes sense to me, just big picture, that if there are going to be game approval freezes or time periods in which it goes really slow, but also just more rules that you have to pay attention to, that favors larger companies who can withstand, darker winters where you can't launch new games, has a bunch of other big games that are already on the market or other parts of your business, you're probably fine, although you don't love what's going on. But if you're a startup who's working on their first game or their second game, that could put you in a really difficult position. Can you speak to like any shakeup in the market that you saw because of these regulatory challenges?
Yeah, it is. We are now at a point in time where it's very difficult for these kind of smaller teams. That's for sure. In the past, when regulations are there are a whole lot more loopholes. It was easier for them to kind of find ways to get their products onto the market. So for these companies, for smaller teams right now is for sure without a doubt very difficult. Because like you said, it's a very complex process and getting approvals and all. Because of that's the landscape it is, that a lot of them have to kind of find ways to get funding from Tencent or like somehow align themselves with these kind of industry giants. And a lot of them, because of tight regulations at home, they're also thinking about going overseas, right? They're launching their products overseas from day one. Actually, they kind of plan and conceive the product from the get-go as an international product. So that's why you're seeing a lot of very interesting, maybe smaller workshop type of titles coming onto Steam and other places, and then they're made by Chinese companies. So yeah, that's sort of the landscape of things.
Yeah, well, which is really interesting. And I know you primarily follow the larger companies and just like the big changes that happen around tech and entertainment. But do you have any sense of like what the impact of this has been on like the venture investing markets? Like, has that like been crippled in China because of these actions, or is it coming back to life as game approvals are starting to reverse course? Do you have any sense of what that looks like?
Yeah, the VC side of things, is very quiet. Due to a lot of reasons, not just regulations. So the funding cycle of things, investors' interest also changed. So right now it's very difficult. Unlike in previous years when you get big investments and all that. But that being said, I think right now the Chinese gaming market is so competitive. If you really do have a very strong team, and you'll get noticed. So for example, a couple of years ago when Genshin Impact first arrived, right, everybody was trying to think, okay, how can I wasn't get the next Genshin Impact, right? How do I develop that? If you have a team that are capable of doing that, you get picked up and noticed by big players very quickly. So I'll point to, it's not Genshin look like or anything like that, but kind of in the same genre. Kuro Games is a very interesting company. They just launched Wuthering Waves. Have you heard? They've been making a lot of waves, no pun intended, on different platforms. So it's also a open world, story driven anime style game, and they're getting a lot of interest. They were invested by Hero Games, which is our sister company, BSPL sister company, and then more notably Tencent. Right, Tencent's a big backer right now because everybody sees that there's the opportunity in this vertical. Yeah, so if you have a strong team and then you are savvy enough to be able to position your game towards the big giants, there's opportunity that.
Gotcha. And do you have any sense of how the regulatory environment could shift, over the rest of the year or deeper into the future? Maybe it's totally unpredictable. But what are your thoughts on looking forward?
I think I can say that for the rest of the year, it's looking like we're getting a quite friendly regulatory landscape. Because, like I said, the sheer amount of approvals that being issued over the past 6 months has been very pleasant. So if you look at the Chinese gaming industry, actually, I feel like the bounce back of the industry is undertold story. Right? People, maybe it's still early on, so that's why people felt like we're not so sure about it. But now you see Tencent putting out big titles like DNF, Dungeons and Fighters Mobile.
Right.
That's a very profitable product. And then, in the pipeline, you got, Delta Force. If you asked, I don't know if you see the trailer, also look amazing. And then, by the way, these games are, a lot of them are, developed with, console and PC in mind. Either in Delta Force, I think maybe is, like console PC first. It's not even like a mobile game. So they kind of, I guess, contradict Tencent's reputation as a mobile first company. But that attests to the point where, like, the Chinese companies, we want to do a AAA game. Also, what is it? Arena Breakout Infinite, which is arena breakout game on mobile, coming to PC. Also, very high quality games. So this year is going to be exciting. I mean, it's already very exciting. Like I said, Wuthering Waves, Black Myth, Wukong. Looking back, maybe this is one of the more exciting years, because in the past couple of years, actually, I don't know, innovations been kind of boring. But this year, maybe, the second half of the year could really pack a punch.
Cool. Sounds like the floodgates are opening, but the looking longer term is more difficult. So I guess switching gears and looking beyond China's walls, as a result of these tighter domestic markets, a few big Chinese gaming companies have definitely prioritized growing in international markets, and obviously that's not new. This has been the case for a long time, and we've seen companies like Tencent have really aggressive M&A strategies over the years, or companies like NetEase, or even Hoyoverse with Genshin Impact and others, like, have a very international approach to launching new games and hitting multiple markets. But I'm curious how you think this will play out over the next decade, because with this rising wave of AAA games, which naturally are more competitive in global markets, how do you think China's imprint on the global gaming industry, or its market share potential, how do you think that could change over the next few years because of these shifts that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think, like you said, on the investment side of things, Tencent have been investing in foreign studios for quite a while now. They've been successful. So that's not new. But I do want to point to, right now we are at a very interesting period of time, a very interesting year, that that the homegrown, AAA video games, from China, it's about time, right? We see, whether they're really at that level. So, Tencent built their own studios in North America, Europe, across the world. They are gearing up, themselves, towards that goal. So I think right now is a bit of a time that you got to show your real results. So we will see. I mean, at this point in time, we saw that, I alluded to earlier, The Last Sentinel. That's probably one of the most promising, developments coming out of Tencent. Because prior to that, they essentially pay a lot of tuition. A lot of projects kind of got shelved. A lot of projects, got shelved. Some of the projects right now are just going through difficult times. So it wasn't clear. But now, yeah, I would say that right now is about time for them to show some products.
Yeah. So I guess how I see this is there is an element of this, which is games that are being made in China that are bigger production value. They're coming online. They're targeting the whole world, and they probably will have some type of impact. And then there's another piece of it, which is games that are not made in China, but they're made by Tencent and NetEase, who have set up shop around the world, primarily in North America, with new studios, and they're doing that because the older model of M&A, of acquiring other businesses with proven IPs and such, that's not as possible anymore for geopolitical reasons, and so they're taking this other path, which is higher risk, I guess, because you're not getting something that's already proven out, but it's also potentially a higher reward because you're starting at zero and have the potential to build something pretty big and meaningful, even though it takes more time to get off the ground. And I know NetEase has leaned very heavily into that tactic, and Tencent to some degree too. I'm not sure about others, but I'm curious what you think, like specifically about about that part, about how Chinese companies have been kind of skirting the regulatory lens by starting studios from scratch in places like the U.S. And hiring like Western teams to build those games. Like, do you think that strategy is going to stick for the long run and become more meaningful for these businesses, or do you think that will just continue to evolve as geopolitics continues to evolve?
Yeah, again, was it geopolitical pressure is definitely a factor. But I think, overall, if you really want to look at, Tencent's own sort of, vision of things, or, NetEase vision of things, right? For them, okay, on the IP side of things, right? If you keep licensing people's IP, you got to share the revenue. So when the market is so competitive, that's, one factor to consider, whether you really want a very, dated IP, maybe still have some hole, but, we're not so sure. And then that's one factor, right? So we now see, I actually did a story on this, with Reuters a couple months ago, that homegrown IPs is a prized possession, right? And actually, if you look at, the gaming market right now, I don't think fans are crazy about all IPs. So, there's a bit of a realization of that. So, and then second, if you look at these kind of global Chinese conglomerates, they want to build up the actual production capacity. They talk about in Tencent's case, they talk about the industrialization of the game making, game making process within Tencent, right? So they want to actually kind of break through all the silos, and then they own the capability of produce these kind of high level games, because that's what like you said, Western gamer wants. They want AAA games, and then even in China, you really have to show that you have the capability with top notch graphics, everything else to convince that people that you're still like sort of the big dogs in the industry, right?
Right.
So from capability build up perspective, that's also called for. Yeah. So from sort of the production capability build up point of view, right? That's also a factor that that's why they're building up big in-house studios on different continents. And then I think maybe a third thing is just talent. These companies really do want to source different talents. In China. Everybody's very good at monetization, live service. But when it comes to art, especially if you want to grow internationally, expand internationally, you need to have, foreign talents that are more tuned to the sort of artistic preferences of Western players, right? So previously, like you said, maybe investment is good enough, and then that you brand that as a different product, like Riot, like Supercell, their own products. But now, if you really want to kind of build up the in-house capability, you'll have to do that. And that in the long term, that's the direction to go. And like I said, right now, it's in a very interesting time. It's a bit of a sort of mid-term, checkup to see whether they are doing it well.
Yeah. And that's all a good, well thought out answer. And it's also an interesting time because of AI. And in the West, AI is all the rage, where it's probably, even in gaming, it's more hype than substance right now. But we still are seeing like really interesting things happening on the fringes. And now even a lot of big companies are talking about how they're excited for the efficiencies and cost savings that will come with AI, and it's creating a startup and venture boom around it. Could you tell us about what that looks like in China? Is the excitement at a similar level in the games industry to what we're seeing elsewhere in the world, or are there like other unique aspects to like how teams and entrepreneurs are thinking about this technology in the games industry in China?
I imagine it's not too dissimilar, right? I mean, in China, AI is also all the rage. But then, like you said, right now we are, at a point where we don't know how to actually integrate it into fully developed products. It's more gimmicks, features that we try to test things out. And so some of the art can be done, very quickly with AI. We have a few incidents where people picked up that such and such artworks were developed by AI, and then people just kind of rioted against it. So are we really ready enough to put that to work? Right now, it's still a question. What I would say is that if you listen to Tencent's earnings call, they are actually quite cautious. I mean, they talk about AI a lot, but then they're quite cautious about actual AI products rollout, right? Promising AI products rollout. It's because of that, right? I guess in their case, the executives are saying that right now it's still, they're even not kind of they're not the most aggressive type. Let me just say. When I went to a lot of the different conferences, they do talk about AI agents, being interesting, being an interesting use case and potentially be deployed into games, NPCs, AI and NPCs, but it's still early talk. So we have to see what comes out of it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I'm especially curious in the case of Tencent because not only is it the largest gaming company in the world, but it's also just one of the largest tech companies in the world, and especially in China, is just positioned to have a touch point on basically everyone's life in a multitude of ways, and is like a core source of R&D in the country of where like AI innovation would probably come from in part. And so what we see from Tencent will just be really interesting and could be telling for what other companies think to do over time. But I guess we have to wait for that story to play out some more. But with that, I actually thought it would be interesting to spend a few minutes talking about specific companies like Tencent, NetEase, etc., and just get your take on like what's interesting or notable about these businesses right now that, if you're not paying close attention, you probably wouldn't see. And maybe we can start with Tencent. I'm curious what your general outlook for the largest gaming company in the world is, but also if there's just anything super interesting to you about the business right now.
Yeah, I think I sort of touched on some of the big titles that are about to release just now, right? And I think interesting thing about Tencent right now is they're really thinking about the platform strategy. Maybe in the West, people already took the Roblox success for granted, and then now all these kind of Chinese gaming companies are thinking along the same line. How do we kind of replicate Roblox success, but in a Chinese context? When they talk about mini games, so like mini apps and all that, they're really actually, if you talk, listen to their executives, they're thinking along that line. So mini apps is essentially, you pull out, you pull up WeChat, and then within WeChat you search a certain games, or like there's a panel you get up for interesting games, and then it load immediately, right? Instantly. So it's like the light games, on maybe different messaging apps, in the West that have tested before, but not to the same level of success. But right now they're actually getting quite a bit of traction on WeChat. When you listen to the Tencent executive talk about this, they're really thinking about platform strategy. This is odd, right? Because you feel like, okay, maybe this is like a Facebook, H5 games, that type of, like that's more what we're thinking about. But then in their mind, they're really kind of referencing the Roblox platform strategy. What they see for WeChat is so much more complex and so much more sophisticated. That's one aspect of it. And I think you wanted to talk about NetEase too, and I think maybe just kind of tie it into this conversation as well. NetEase also thinking along the same line, right? The biggest new title for NetEase is Eggy Party, over the past 18 months, right?
Yeah.
But if you really think about it, the success of Eggy Party really came about because there's a vacuum that left for Roblox absence in China. That game. Feature, kind of feature a lot of the same functions as Roblox, UGC centric. Like they heavily focus on allowing players to, create maps and create levels within that game. And then it's a party game. It's easy to play. So I think, I personally feel like, a part of it because, Roblox isn't officially available in China. But then these kind of big players already saw that Roblox success is a great reference, and that it will be able to gain a big market share in China, and then that's why they're thinking along those lines. And yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, interesting. Hadn't thought about that, but the UGC wave would probably hit China a bit differently than what we've seen elsewhere in the world with Roblox and Fortnite and UEFN. How about Bytedance? I guess first of all, like, what's going on with Bytedance and gaming right now? Because it seems like they, several months ago, they basically said that they were going to sell Newverse, which was like their big publisher, and just rethink gaming as a whole in the context of their business. And maybe that's changed, but I don't know. Maybe you can just talk about what the heck is going on there, and if there is anything interesting still going on, would love for you to highlight that too.
Yeah, well, Bytedance, that's very interesting because when they first became this new Chinese giant, they are really trying to rival Tencent, right? And then Tencent, a big gaming footprint, they too think about, okay, we need to go for content, we need to go for gaming. So that's the sort of the historical background. But at its core, Tencent is very committed to becoming platform as well as a content company. But then Bytedance is still at its core more a platform company. So I think at a high level thinking at the time, when they were like, okay, whether Newverse is actually worth continuing to pursue, they were like, our identity is a platform company. So they kind of felt like gaming maybe it's not paying off, right? They're trying to sell off a lot of the gaming projects, which a lot of them have got sold. Made no mistake about it. One thing that didn't get sold is Moontooth, right? Moontooth, right? So the developer of the Mobile Legends Bang Bang. Is first of all, the company got acquired at a very high valuation, and it's a very interesting company with a lot of capability. And after a few months of testing the market and all that, I think last month they decided that they're no longer selling it. So they look like they're giving it a second try, at least at some level. And then they appointed a new head for the gaming division. So they'll represent. They're still trying to test out whether where they can go with some of their gaming efforts. But yeah, I think that's sort of the pivot earlier. Was it late last year when they decided to kind of retreat from gaming? It was because of that thinking, right? They feel like the video platform company, content, they're still trying to figure it out. But yeah, so that's, I guess, the latest development.
Gotcha. So still figuring it out. How about Hoyoverse? They seem to have figured it out a decent amount. They're the latest, mega gaming company from China to break through globally more than once now. First with Genshin Impact, now with Honkai Star Rail, and I'm sure they're working on a bunch of other interesting titles. What do you think about them? Like, are you excited about their future? Anything interesting that you want to call out that maybe people are sleeping on?
Yeah, with Hoyoverse, Genshin Impact. Actually, before Genshin Impact, you already got like Honkai Impact Third. You play, that was time. A very interesting title. So wow, this game is so good. But then when they released the trailer for Breath of the Wild, when they released the trailer for Genshin Impact, and then got such a big backlash, and then I was like, I don't know how I feel about this company. But now they proved themselves twice again, right? With Genshin Impact success, it's Honkai Star Rail. And the next one is the ZZZ game. So the
Zone Zero.
Zone Zero, yeah. That game got a lot of hype, a lot of eyeballs in China, and then it looks like it could be a very big success for them as well.
So thanks for sharing your thoughts on some of the biggest gaming companies in China. Are there any other companies that are maybe less well known that you think are super interesting that others around the world should be aware of? Maybe they'll break out and be the next Hoyoverse in their own way, or something else. Anything you want to call out?
Yeah, this I think I already alluded to them before. So the developer of Black Myth Wukong, if you're like into Souls like, AAA combat, heavy games, Black Myth Wukong right now is the big Chinese game coming out, right? So Game Science is the developer of it. Definitely watch out for what they do. They were invested by Tencent, and then ESPL's boss Dino also invested it as an angel investor. So very interesting game. And then Wuthering Waves, just came out. Also, like that I alluded to before, very interesting combat, focused cross-platform anime style game. So that's Kuro Games, based in Guangzhou. Also a very interesting company. Definitely watch out for what they do. Yeah, so like those are the two games that come to mind for sure.
A couple final questions here before we wrap up. First of all, are there any innovations happening in China right now around China's gaming market that we should pay closer attention to? Maybe it's game design related, maybe it's technology related, or something interesting going on in a particular genre. Any innovations that you think could go global that is starting in China right now?
I think with games specifically, it's the trend of cross-platform games being developed in China, right? Like I said, it's crazy that right now they're really kind of bridging the different platforms. Previously, we thought that China just a mobile gaming mobile game specialist. Right now, they're really moving that expertise to the different traditional platforms, consoles and PC, etc. And largely, because that is because the emergence of Unreal Engine and a lot of the more sophisticated engine that can be used cross-platform. Yeah, so look out for Chinese gaming companies be sort of leaders leading that waves of cross-platform games.
Yeah, I think the cross-platform trend is a good one to call out, and it's interesting too because it's not new. I think you probably could have said that 4 years ago when Genshin Impact, broke out and took over the world, and everyone was like, "Whoa, what's happening here?" That this is a moment. And for whatever reason, that type of success has not really been replicated well in other parts of the world. So I think you're right. It has been China, holding the spear and pushing the tip of the spear out to the rest of the world.
Yeah, because like if that were just one game, right? Right now we're talking about paradigm shifts where a lot of the games are going that direction. So I mean that's also kudos to MiHoYo for being able to kind of pioneer that trend 4 years prior. But now this is certainly going to be a big trend.
Yeah. And another question for you here. I'm curious what your outlook is for gaming in China beyond the most popular platforms today. So mobile and PC. What do you think the future is for console, VR, alternative gaming hardware? Maybe there are interesting growth stories going on right now, or innovations and China's tech market that are gearing up for other types of hardware. But anything stand out to you beyond mobile and PC that could impact gaming in the country?
Yeah, I think you alluded to VR. VR is certainly a big direction that people are thinking about. And if you look at a lot of hardware for Oculus as well as the Apple Vision Pro, they come from China. So a lot of people are already very familiar with the hardware, and a lot of the new VR or XR brands are actually also coming out of China. I've been to many such conferences, XR VR conferences, and a lot of people are thinking very hard about this. And it really trace China's success in the gaming industry is because the arrival of the mobile gaming era, right? Chinese gaming companies were very fast and very capable of developing mobile games from the get-go when people are still kind of looking at it as a niche market. So don't be surprised that when VR become more mature, a lot of these kind of content will be made by Chinese teams. Like I said, because we got a lot of hardware specialists in China already, very familiar with the ecosystem, and then a lot of homegrown XR VR brands. And then if you look at Unreal, TCL, all these brands are doing their versions of the XR. Because I guess in China, it's easier to kind of put together these kind of new products because the supply chain is here.
Right.
We can quickly kind of assemble some demo and then get some money and then roll it out to market and then test it within the Chinese market. So if you guys are not familiar with developments in the if you guys are not familiar with the Chinese market, certainly look out for some of the VR and XR products coming out of China, both on the hardware and the software side of things. But I mean, I don't know. Personally, I'm still not 100% sold on whether XR VR is going to be the platform, the ultimate platform. Before we just kind of digitize ourselves, right, and upload our consciousness into the cloud. I'm not 100% sold on it yet, but I feel like all these sci-fi movies kind of point to that as the ultimate way of doing it. So I don't know. We don't get the same level of consensus as when smartphone came about. That everybody feel like, okay, this is a surefire way for how people interact with gadgets in the future.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but it still is interesting though, right? Especially if I don't know how like a company like Meta will open source their like operating system, similar to how Google open sourced Android in the past. And through open sourcing Android, it enabled companies all around the world, like in China, where much of the supply chain is, to build on Android and fork Android and kind of create their own ecosystems on it. And, through that, got a bunch of the big Chinese tech companies that we see today. And yeah, maybe there's some similar parallel to that over the next decade or so with whatever VR, XR is going to be. It's still super early. China will probably even have their own competing operating systems and such too from some of these big tech companies. But yeah, really curious to see how that goes. Very final question for you, Josh. We covered a lot here today, but is there anything else that you're excited about for the future? It doesn't have to be China related, but any game or company or trend that has been extra on your mind lately that you want to give a final shout out to?
Another very interesting thing about hardware was that that the arrival of like Steam Deck really kind of changed. Steam Deck is a very beloved piece of hardware by gamers, right? And then so if you look at a lot of the sort of the Steam Deck alternatives, hardware, handheld, gaming PCs, like many of them are Chinese. So a lot of the Chinese, hardware makers, and they're already thinking along this kind of form factors, right? Lenovo had like Legion as a Legion brand. They go with a handheld PC, and then a lot of the lesser known names, they're based in Shenzhen. I try some of those products. They're very compelling. So handheld is also a very interesting space to look out for. I think some of the bigger companies, console makers, are also thinking about maybe we should consider handheld again.
Yeah, that's a great point too. So we'll be on the lookout for interesting hardware innovations to come out of China, but also handheld innovations too. I guess it's the benefit of there being really complex and proven supply chains kind of at the cutting edge to bring many versions of this to life to compete in the market. But awesome, Josh. Very final question. If anyone wants to get in touch with you or follow along with whatever it is you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, so I'm very active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is by Josh Ye, and that's the best way to kind of interact with me. I also have a personal website. If you go onto my Twitter, you'll find it there. I kind of show all the stories I've done in the past with different publications, and then so follow me on Twitter. That's the best way to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, Josh, let's go ahead and wrap it up here. Great job. And thank you for hopping on today.
Thank you, Aaron. It's a very interesting conversation for sure.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.